Good morning, everybody. This is torchcactus.com, and we are having our second mega bloom of the year. Oh my gosh, where do you start? I know I sound the same on all my videos, but it's just amazing. I'm going to show you as many beautiful flowers as I can. We'll pan out. Here's a beautiful peach colored one, and I'll try to give you all the names as I go along. This one here is one of my hybrids called Flying Serape, and it's Flying Saucer times Serape. That's why I call it that. Here's a beautiful yellow one. Here's one that's pastel, kind of a little bit peachy pink with a yellow throat. This one's called Strawberry Cheesecake. I hope I got that right. Here's a big open flower, one of my hybrids. Some of these are my hybrids. Some of these I've gotten from other hybridizers, and I've collected on, eBay and Etsy just like everybody else. But now we're trying to put together a really good collection. Oh my gosh, look at this orangey one over here. Just contrasting with these pink and peach colors. And then you move into some of these reds like this, salmon red. And when you put them all together, it makes quite a stunning show. More beautiful plants down here. Oh my gosh, look at that. This pink one and this orange and pink one here are a couple of seedlings that I grew. So I do hybridize, and to understand what a hybrid is, it's taking one species and crossing it with a different species. So if you can look inside the flower here, these are called, and I can poke some out, these are called anthers, and the anthers have pollen on them. And if you take the pollen from here and you apply it to this portion of the flower here, it will create a hybrid. So it will have the genetics of this plant and this plant combined. And so the seedlings will come out in various different fashions.
Is it true that if you say you cross-pollinate them, right? But you get the seed, let's say from this plant, when it flowers, it will have more of the characteristics of this plant. Is that true than this plant?
That is possible. There are certain plants that seem to have very dominant characteristics that come out in the seedlings, even if they're not the parent plant. And when we talk about the parent plant, so if I took pollen from here to here, and then this flower created a seed pod or a fruit, and then I harvested the seeds, this would be the parent plant. This would be the pollen donor.
Pollen donor.
And so typically the seed parent has more dominance, but that's not always true.
Not always.
No, not always true. Plant genetics are very complicated. If you study Mendel in high school and in college, he used peas. Peas had only a few alleles. Alleles are like genetic characteristics, and that was very simple. But there are plants that can have hundreds of different alleles. And so genetically, almost anything is possible. But the more you do the crossing, the more you find out there's genetic probability. You kind of get used to what you should expect to see. But then again, once in a while, you'll get a plant that looks neither like either one. So I could cross this pink one with this orangey one, and I can get white ones, yellow and white ones.
White.
I can get red ones. I can get all kinds of different colors out of here, because this is not a pure species. This is already a hybrid that probably has
Is it like
5 or 6 different parents in it.
Right.
And then this one has 5 or 6 different parents in it. So then when I cross them together, all kinds of strange things pop out. I would get whites, yellows, and whites.
Out of
pinks,
the same fruit?
All out of the same fruit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's really wild. All right, I get questions all the time on how do you make a hybrid? How do you pollinate another cactus? So if I want to take the pollen off of this one and hybridize it with this plant, I would need to first collect pollen. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. One way is to just get a metal dish underneath your flowers and swipe off some of that pollen into a dish like this. Or you could even just take off the whole flower.
Whoa.
And you could try to get some of that pollen off of this into the dish. But to make things a little bit faster, I've already collected some pollen. So again, you would take the pollen off of these little anthers and try to shave it into a dish.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have enough pollen, like I do here, this is pollen from a plant like this.
Hold on, Brent. When you collect the pollen, do you like dry them out first?
Yes. Now you could use it right away.
Here?
You can use it fresh. If you have the pollen, you can use it right away. But if you're going to store it in your refrigerator or freeze it like I do, you want to keep it in a metal container like this in the shade for at least 2 days. So all the moisture dissipates and it's very dry.
Oh, okay.
Then you put it into a plastic capsule like this and store it in your refrigerator. And if you're going to keep it long term, it's good to go right away, put it in the freezer. Now it needs to be dry so it doesn't form ice crystals. Ice crystals will ruin the pollen. And if it's properly stored in the refrigerator, it can last a month. And if it's properly stored in the freezer, it can last 2 or more years. So what I want to do is to get pollen into the protruding thing here, which there is names for all this. This is the pistil, and I want to get it right down into the middle, right down into the middle. So what I will do is get a little bit of pollen, and I just use this old knife I have. And I want to get it right down into the middle of that, because that's where the pollen tube will grow. And just pack it in like that. Now, nothing else like a bee or anything else can come by and pollinate it with something else. Now it's for sure, this pink one is now on this orange one. And another thing you really want to do, and probably the most important thing, is you want to get some kind of label. What I use is twister seals. They're cheap, they're easy, and you can get a felt tip pen and you can label what it is. So I would put,
this is the one with the wire inside.
yeah, this is a twister seal like this.
I see. Okay.
So then I'll label it, what I did, and then I'll put it around the base of this flower. So I can come back later and check to see if it made a fruit. If it made a fruit, then I know what I got, because this plant will keep on flowering and have other fruits of other different miscellaneous hybrids. But this one, I purposely made a hybrid out of. So I want to label that, keep it labeled, and then come back later when the fruit is ripe, and then harvest the fruit and process the seeds. So that's how you make a hybrid. You just got to get pollen from here to there. That's it. And then I was telling you that these are really called Trichoceras, but in reality, and I know there's going to be people who don't like what I'm just about to say, technically, in the biology world, they're all Echinopsis. And so we call the taller ones Trichoceras and the shorter, squattier ones Echinopsis. But Trichoceras and Echinopsis can hybridize with a lot of other types of cactus. There's 14 different genera that they can cross with. And
so what are the other genus like? Yeah,
so one of the really exciting things,
Echinopsis,
right? And
what else?
Lobivia, Chamaeroceras,
the peanut cactus,
right?
Okay.
And Hildewentura, which is the monkey tail cactus, and Cleistocactus. And there's, off the top of my head, I can't name them all, but there's about 8 more. And so there's some pretty wild and strange things that can be done by crossing those different genus together. So it's called an intergeneric hybrid. When you take 2 species that are separated and cross them together, you can get seedlings that are from 2 different genera and those seedlings are an intergeneric hybrid. So Lobivia can cross with Trichoceras. And so here's an example of a Lobivia. So this is called Lobivia Easter, and you can see it's a very small plant. It's about the size of a golf ball. The flowers are about 2 inches in diameter.
Nice flowers.
Not a very big plant, but it's got a lot of potential. It's got a lot of beautiful color, a lot of contrast. And I actually could take pollen from this and put it on here and get larger Lobivias with bigger flowers. I could actually take the pollen from here and put it on here and get Trichoceras with unusual characteristics. So we're playing around with a lot of these intergeneric crosses right now. In fact, we're putting some of these on Trichoceras peruvianus and Trichoceras pachanoi, which get 15 feet tall.
Yeah.
Huge.
Wow.
And I was successful last year in putting Lobivias on Trichoceras pachanoi and Trichoceras peruvianus. And we have those seedlings growing now, so it actually worked.
Oh, they're still seedlings.
Right. And the interesting thing
how the flowers would look like and the plant itself, because that's a tiny plant and you cross it with a big plant, one plant that grows tall.
And we call those pachanoi varieties, the tall ones, peruvianus and various other species. They typically all have white flowers.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is cross these really colorful plants on these tall white ones to try to get something taller with color. So we're hoping that some of those seedlings come out nice. I'm going to focus on this one for just a second. This is called Y Magnolia, W-I-E Magnolia, and it has this really darker mauve throat with light pink petals. Very beautiful. Oh my gosh, more and more and more. More flowers. Here's a white one. Here's another one of my hybrids, and this is off a flying saucer, so it produces large flowers. But it can also produce things like this pastel pink. I think we call this one Dreamcatcher. And if you want to find my plants for sale, the best place to go is on Facebook and go to groups and go to the group Torch Cactus. That's Torch Cactus. Join the group and you can see all of my listings of various different Echinopsis and Trichoceras and Lobivias. Here's one called Trichoceras Phoenix. That's a hybrid I did a couple of years ago. And then you get over to these just stunning yellows. Unbelievable. And if you want to see more of my stuff and you want to contact me, go to torchcactus.com. That's my website. And you can see my contact info and text me. So if you're not on Facebook, you can text me. Just let me know what you want and I'll do my best to get your order out. And if you want to come over here and visit and you're in the Southern California area, I highly recommend that. And you can contact me by going to torchcactus.com and getting my contact information. Just make an appointment with me and come on over and take a look for yourself. And really, you don't want to think too hard. You do want to think about the outcome. What is your objective? But you don't want to negate and not think about the plants that you're looking at. Are they robust plants? Are they easy to grow plants? Do they offset well? Are they solitary? These are characteristics that you might want to breed into another plant. So it's not always about the flower size, the flower color, it's the whole thing. It's the plant and the flower. And so what I'm trying to do is make things that are, for instance, if I was going to cross this with this, I would be looking for seedlings that are looking like this but a little bit larger. If you could imagine this to be a 6 by 8 inch plant and the flowers 7 inches in diameter with this kind of color, that would really be stunning. And that's possible. So you kind of got to pick an avenue that you want to go down. Are you looking for striped flowers, bicolored flowers, large and striped, large lobivias with larger flowers? It just depends on what you like. But you don't want to negate what the plant looks like. The plant morphology is also very important. Do you want miniature plants, And I'm actually trying to create more miniatures because you can put more miniature plants on one shelf than you can these larger plants. We took a little lobivia like this and we crossed it with a large Trichoceros peruvianus that gets 15 feet tall. And the strange thing is the peruvianus was the seed parent, and the seedlings look exactly like this.
Wow.
So the lobivia came out dominant, not the Trichoceros peruvianus, which is really strange.
But the fruit was taken out of
the peruvianus. But the plant structure looks more like a lobivia than it does a peruvianus. So we don't know what's going to happen. We're going to have to wait another year or so to see these things get bigger.
Yes, especially when it flowers.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting.
Have you ever crossed a Trichocereus with this tiny peanut cactus and get the seeds out of these?
We've crossed it and we have seeds and they're growing, and that'll be a to be continued to see what the results of it look like.
Something to look forward to in the future.
You can cross Chamroceros with tall Trichoceros, and I do have examples of that. They're not my crosses, they're crosses from other people in Europe, and they can look like this. This is a Chamroceros crossed with a Trichoceros. And there are also Chamroceros crossed with Hildewentrias, and there's also Trichoceros crossed with Hildewentrias. And so there's a whole array of these different plants.
So the mother plant is a Trichocereus,
yes,
and the pollen donor is a
Chamroceros.
So
and they can come out. They can come out looking like this.
Tall and skinny.
They can.
I see.
They can. And the ones that are done with Cleistocactus typically bend over like the monkey tail cactus.
Oh yeah. Do you have an example of that?
I do. So this
would be interesting because Cleistocactus has a different way of growing. Like they hang and they bend.
This is a really good Hildewentria cross. I don't know what they crossed it from, but I do know the parent plant was a Hildewentria. This one's called Amethyst. It's a really nice pink and fuchsia bicolor, but this will arch all the way down. And one of the favorite things people do with this is they get one of those Medusa heads and they plant this in the top, and it looks like snakes coming out of it. It's just something to do. But it's a really pretty plant. So you can put it in a pot and it will trellis all the way down. And it can get 2 feet long with flowers all the way up it. So it's a very different effect. And some people do put them in baskets and hang them from the ceiling of a shade house or a patio. So that's pretty interesting. So this is another example of an intergeneric hybrid. So it's Hildewentria and Echinopsis or Trichoceros. So that's a really unusual thing.
Okay. Is there like a certain characteristic of a hybrid cactus that you hope or maybe dream of achieving someday that you haven't done yet?
There's two things I'm really trying to work on. I'm trying to get tall things like Trichoceros peruvianus and Pachanoi crossed with small miniatures to try to get a medium to tall cactus that looks like a peruvianus or Pachanoi with colors, like vibrant colors. And we're also working on trying to make giant lobivias. And I have some examples of giant lobivias.
Giant lobivias, all right.
So I'm going to take this and make it an example and show you some of our first generation giant lobivias. So this is a typical little lobivia. They're very small plants. And if you cross a large Trichoceros onto this lobivia, like a flying saucer, you can end up with giant lobivias.
That is a lobivia.
This is a lobivia Trichoceros hybrid.
That is the biggest lobivia I've seen.
Yeah, that's the biggest one I've ever seen too. And the flowers on this, a couple of them did flower last year, and they had flowers from 6 to 8 inches in diameter. With these intense colors. So this really gets my
6 to 8 inches lobivia. No way, that's like a Trichocereus.
And this is still this is only a 2-year-old seedling. So this plant may end up getting the diameter of a basketball, about the height of a basketball, 12 inches, but it will have tons of flowers that can get up to 8 inches with this really sharp color. That's what I'm after. So this is something that's never been done. There's one other person in Europe that really inspired me to try to do this, and we're working on our own genetics here. So that's really exciting that we're getting giant lobivias. Yet we call them giant, but they're still kind of small in stature, but a lot bigger than this.
And smaller than a typical Trichocereus.
Right. And
but
this
larger than a lobivia.
This is something that looks just really good in a pot, you know, for a potted collection on a patio or an atrium or some type of special place in your backyard to make it your space. You can have these really neat plants that don't take up too much space and they don't have a lot of care requirements. So that's what makes them exciting.
So, Brent, what do you think is the future? What does the future hold for growing cactus hybrids?
Well, for Echinopsis, Trichocereus, Lobivia, there is a big future. When I was growing up, I lived next door to a daylily and iris farm. And I remember what the daylilies looked like 35, 40 years ago. And now the daylilies 40 years later are amazing. You would have never thought that the genetics could produce such a thing. And we're kind of in the pioneer stage of cactus hybrids. We're doing some crazy new things with cactus. And I just think in the future, we're gonna have all kinds of unusual bicolored and tricolored and maybe even quadricolored flowers. And we're gonna have flowers that grow all the way down the plant. We're gonna have plants with short spines versus long spines. In fact, we have some of our new generation seedlings right here that I've hybridized. These are all hybrids that I did. And here is one of the hybrids that I crossed this type of a plant, this little lobivia, with a giant Trichocereus peruvianus, and that's what we got growing already. So this plant has never been done before. Nobody I know of has actually put a lobivia on a Trichocereus peruvianus, but maybe somebody has, but I don't know about it. So what this does, it might get 4 feet tall, it might be 10 feet tall, and it might have little tiny pink flowers all the way down it. We don't know. Or it could just have giant pink flowers. So the future is unlimited. I think we're gonna see a lot of mutations, a lot of double flowers, like I said, bicolored, tricolored, maybe even quadricolored flowers. And we might even see mutations someday where we have spineless cactus. Now that would be really cool to have a cactus with no spines. I know it's possible. There are genetic mutations where people have had plants that were spineless, but so far we haven't had anything spineless show up in the Trichocereus world. We have had spineless plants show up in the Phaerocactus world, and here's an example of a spineless Phaerocactus glaucescens. Normally this plant has 2 or 3 inch spines all the way around it, but this is a genetic mutation. This is called Phaerocactus glaucescens nuda, and nuda means it does not have any spines on it. So if we can get the genetics from something like this and breed it with other cactus, we could get more cactus varieties that have no spines. And
have you tried crossing that with the Trichocereus or Echinopsis?
That's a great question. This is too far removed from the genus of Trichocereus, Echinopsis, and Lobivia for them to cross. That would be a great idea, but I don't think it would work. But just because I don't think it would work doesn't mean it's not worth trying.
Okay.
So I mean, we can try it and see if it works, but hopefully someday we get a mutation in the Trichocereus world that gives us the genetics to make more spineless plants. That would be really cool to have spineless plants.